The summer nights in suburban Texas always carried a kind of quiet comfort. The hum of crickets rising from the grass, the glow of porch lights dotting the cul-de-sac. At the end of Willow Creek Drive stood a home that seemed to belong in a glossy magazine. Fresh white paint, a manicured yard, 2 luxury cars parked neatly in the driveway. To neighbors, it was the picture of success and stability. That was where Dr. Michael Lawson lived with his wife, Emily, and for 10 years they had been the couple everyone admired. Michael wasn't just any doctor. He was a respected gynecologist with a thriving practice, the man countless women trusted to guide them through the most delicate moments of their lives. He had a calm bedside manner, a polished reputation, and the financial comfort that came with it. Emily, graceful and poised, was often seen by his side at charity galas or community events, the kind of partner who seemed born to complement his status. They were, in many ways, the embodiment of the American dream. A successful doctor and his elegant wife building a life together, flawless on the outside. Friends described them as inseparable. Michael was known for pulling out Emily's chair at dinner parties, for buying her flowers even when there wasn't an occasion. Emily, in turn, carried herself with quiet dignity, attentive to every detail that made their home warm and inviting. Together, they appeared effortless, almost cinematic, like characters in a story where nothing could possibly go wrong. Behind closed doors, their life seemed equally charmed. Vacations to the Gulf Coast, weekends at the country club, photos framed along the staircase of sunsets and smiling faces. 10 years of memories that suggested permanence. And yet, even within that perfect image, there were shadows most people never noticed. The couple never had children, something neighbors sometimes whispered about. When asked, Michael would shrug and say their careers kept them too busy, while Emily would offer a polite smile and change the subject. It never drew suspicion, not really. People assumed it was their choice, the kind of modern marriage that didn't need children to feel complete. But to Michael, there was always a hint of distance around the subject, a tension he couldn't quite name. Still, those moments were rare, and they never disturbed the mask of perfection that the Lawsons wore in public. At church on Sundays, they arrived hand in hand, nodding to friends as if they had no worries in the world. At community events, Emily stood proud, while Michael shook hands with patients who praised his compassion. The admiration was constant, and Michael thrived on it. For him, reputation wasn't just important, it was everything. It was the kind of life that looked unbreakable from the outside. And maybe that's why what happened next would shake the entire town to its core. Because behind the locked doors of that beautiful home, a secret was waiting. A secret that had been carefully buried for a decade. A secret that, once discovered, would not only end a marriage, it would end a life. For now, though, on that quiet street with the glow of porch lights and the murmur of cicadas, all anyone could see was the perfect couple. And that was the cruelest part. No one knew they were watching the calm before the storm. From the outside, the Lawson marriage looked like something everyone else wished they had. Michael would come home from the hospital in his tailored shirt sleeves, slipping off his tie as Emily handed him a glass of wine. Dinner was always immaculate, grilled salmon with asparagus, a perfectly lit table. They hosted friends who marveled at how seamlessly the couple moved around each other, finishing each other's sentences, exchanging those knowing glances that spoke of years of intimacy. It was easy to believe they were the real thing, the kind of pair you'd call solid. Michael's practice flourished. His name appeared in local magazines as one of the city's top doctors. Patients trusted him, admired his ability to listen, to explain without judgment. Emily played the part of the supportive wife with ease. She managed the household, oversaw renovations, planned vacations. She seemed happy to stand in his shadow, glowing quietly as his career rose higher. Their home became a gathering place for barbecues and holiday dinners, where neighbors would sit on the patio and remark, "That's what a marriage should look like." But perfection has a way of hiding hairline fractures. It started with subtle things, the kind you'd only notice if you were paying close attention. Conversations about family would sometimes tighten the air between them. When a friend announced a pregnancy, Michael would raise his glass in congratulations while Emily's smile faltered just enough to betray something unspoken. At neighborhood gatherings, people would ask casually if they'd ever considered children. Michael would give the practiced answer, "We're too busy right now, maybe one day," but his jaw would clench, his voice a shade too quick. Emily would laugh softly, deflecting, but the subject always ended the same way, a sharp turn into safer topics. Michael told himself it didn't matter. Not every couple needed kids. They had freedom, money, each other. But sometimes, late at night, when the house was silent and Emily had already drifted asleep, he would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why the thought of children brought that same invisible wall between them. There were other things, too. Emily avoided doctors. For a man whose life was medicine, Michael found it strange that his wife always had an excuse. Too busy, not necessary, a dislike of hospitals. When she caught the flu, she treated it herself with over-the-counter remedies. When he suggested an annual physical, she brushed it aside, her tone a little too sharp for what should have been an easy question. And then there were the nights Emily would retreat into herself. She was affectionate, yes, but sometimes distant, as though carrying a weight she couldn't set down. Michael chalked it up to stress, or maybe fatigue from keeping up appearances. He told himself every marriage had mysteries, and perhaps it was better not to pry too much. Still, the unease sat with him, a quiet itch that never quite left. Friends saw none of this. To them, the Lawsons were a love story. 10 years of loyalty, travel photos splashed across social media, matching outfits at galas. They'd pose in front of Christmas trees, arms wrapped tight, the captions dripping with sentiment. "Another year, another adventure with my love." What the friends and neighbors didn't see were the private arguments, small but cutting. Michael had a temper he kept carefully hidden from the world, a flash of anger when Emily brushed off his questions, when her evasion struck too close to his pride. He'd cool down quickly, apologizing, smoothing it over, but those cracks were there. Emily, for her part, carried a sadness he never fully understood. She was devoted, loving, but there was always a part of her that seemed guarded, like a door locked from the inside. And yet the rhythm of their lives carried on. Vacations to Mexico, anniversary dinners with candlelight and champagne, weekend mornings reading the newspaper side by side. From afar, nothing looked amiss. Even up close, the fractures were easy to miss if you didn't want to see them. Michael didn't. He built his life on order, on reputation, on the certainty that he was a man in control. Any doubts he pushed aside. He had a wife who adored him, a career that defined him, a home others envied. What more could a man ask for? Still, in the quiet moments, those doubts had a way of creeping back. Why was Emily so secretive about her past? Why, after a decade, did he know so little about her life before him? He had asked once, early in their marriage, and she'd answered vaguely, something about moving from out of state, about family she no longer spoke to. He let it go then, believing her when she said it didn't matter. But sometimes, when he caught her expression harden at the mention of old friends or family histories, he wondered what exactly she was keeping from him. He wondered if the perfection of their life was built on something he didn't yet understand. And though he didn't know it then, he was right. There was a secret, one buried so carefully that it had lasted 10 years. One that would soon explode, tearing through everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved and about himself. It happened on a night that began like any other. Michael had come home late, the fatigue of a long day clinging to his shoulders. Emily was already asleep upstairs, her hair fanned across the pillow, the soft glow of the bedside lamp painting her face in amber light. Michael moved quietly through the house, loosening his tie, setting down his briefcase. He poured himself a drink and headed to his office, intending only to catch up on paperwork before calling a night. The office was his sanctuary, a polished mahogany desk, degrees framed on the wall, books neatly lined up. Everything about it screamed order, control, professionalism. He sat down, searching through drawers for a file he needed. His hand brushed against a small metal key, one he didn't recognize at first. It slid against his palm, catching the light. Curious, he glanced down and noticed a locked compartment in the lower part of the desk, a compartment he never remembered using. Something in him hesitated. It wasn't his style to snoop, but the key fit perfectly, and in that quiet house with the cicadas droning outside, curiosity won. The drawer clicked open. Inside, stacked neatly in a manila envelope, were papers, medical forms, prescriptions, photocopied IDs. He frowned, pulling them out, the pages crackling in his hands. At first, it didn't register. The top page listed a patient's name, Emily Grace Lawson. Below it, a birth date, an address that matched their old apartment. But then came the word that froze him. Sex, male. Michael blinked, his breath catching in his throat. He read it again. Sure, it must have been a clerical error. But the next page confirmed it. Surgical records from over a decade ago, notes from a gender transition process, hormone therapy prescriptions. The truth was staring at him in black ink. The woman he had married, the woman he had built his life around, had been born a man. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. His mind raced in fragments, flashes of their wedding day, anniversaries, the countless times Emily had looked into his eyes and said she loved him. It all slammed against the word male like glass against concrete. His chest burned, his pulse thundering in his ears. The first wave was disbelief. Then came anger, hot, suffocating anger that seemed to rise from his gut. How could she hide this from him? 10 years. 10 years of marriage, of intimacy, of trust. And all the while, she had carried this secret. Michael felt his face flush as humiliation crashed over him. What would his colleagues think if they ever found out? His patients? His peers in the medical community? He was a gynecologist. He specialized in women's health, and yet the woman in his own bed had concealed something so fundamental. He slammed the folder shut, his hands trembling. In the hallway, the house groaned with the settling of wood, the sound too loud, too accusatory in the silence. Michael stood, pacing, his drink forgotten on the desk. Every thought spiraled darker. The whispers of neighbors if the truth leaked, the headlines that could ruin him, the loss of the pristine reputation he had worked his entire life to build. Finally, he stormed into the bedroom. Emily stirred at the noise, blinking awake. Michael? What is it? Her voice was drowsy, soft. He threw the folder onto the bed, pages spilling across the comforter. What the hell is this? His voice cracked with rage. Emily sat up, her eyes widening as she recognized the documents. Her face drained of color. Michael, please. You lied to me. For 10 years, you've lied. He was shouting now, fists clenched at his sides. Emily's voice broke, trembling. I didn't lie. I couldn't tell you. You wouldn't have stayed. You wouldn't have married me. You think that makes it better? His tone was venomous. Do you have any idea what this does to me? To my name? My career? I'm a doctor, Emily. A gynecologist. What happens when people find out that my wife... He couldn't even finish the sentence. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she reached for him. Michael, I love you. Everything we've shared, it was real. I didn't want to lose you. I was terrified. But her words only fanned the fire in him. Love? How could she use that word when she had built their life on deception? To Michael, it was betrayal in its purest form. And worse, it was exposure. His entire identity, his reputation, balanced on a secret he hadn't chosen but was now chained to. The room seemed smaller, the air heavy with accusation. Emily begged him to listen, to understand, but Michael's thoughts spiraled into darker corners. Every page of those documents felt like a nail in the coffin of his career, his pride, his manhood. What began as a marriage built on trust and admiration was unraveling in real time, thread by thread, under the weight of a truth too heavy for him to carry. And in that moment, as the night deepened and the shouting grew louder, the stage was set for what no one could have imagined. A love story 10 years in the making, hurtling toward its violent end. Michael's voice shook the walls. The folder lay scattered on the bedspread, papers fluttering like torn feathers. Emily tried to gather them with trembling hands, but Michael slapped them away. His face was red, veins standing out on his temples, his chest heaving with fury. You tricked me, he hissed, his voice lower now, more dangerous than the shouting. 10 years, Emily. 10 years you let me play the fool. Emily's tears streaked down her cheeks. I didn't trick you. I was terrified. You don't know what it's like to be judged, to be hated for something you never chose. I loved you, Michael. I still do. I thought if I told you, I'd lose you forever. He paced the room, hands clawing through his hair. You should have given me that choice. You don't understand. My career, my reputation. If this gets out, it won't just ruin me. It'll destroy everything I've worked for. Do you think people won't talk? Do you think they'll respect me the same way when they know my wife? His voice cracked again, the words choking him, half rage, half shame. Emily flinched, but forced herself to meet his eyes. So that's all I am to you? A liability? A headline waiting to happen? I'm your wife, Michael. 10 years of memories, of love, of building a life together. None of that was fake. The look he gave her was cold, almost unrecognizable. All of it was built on a lie. She sobbed, reaching for him, but he recoiled as if her touch might burn him. I beg God to give me the courage to tell you, she whispered. But every time, I saw the way you cared about what people thought, the way your name had to shine brighter than everyone else's. I knew you'd never forgive me. I was right. Michael's jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ached. The more she spoke, the more cornered he felt, like an animal thrashing inside a cage. His mind replayed the imagined whispers of colleagues, the smirks of rivals, the collapse of the image he had built brick by brick. Rage clawed at him, sharper than reason, more suffocating than fear. Emily's voice softened, desperate now. We can get through this. Please, Michael. No one has to know. It's just us. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, anything. I can't lose you. Her words, meant to soothe, only deepened his fury. To Michael, they weren't promises. They were chains, reminders of the secret that could shatter him at any moment. He stepped closer, his shadow looming over her. You already lost me the day you lied. She shook her head violently, backing toward the dresser. Don't say that. Don't you dare. Something inside him snapped. The humiliation, the fear, the betrayal. All of it surged into his hands as he grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? Emily cried out, struggling against his grip. Stop, Michael. Please, you're hurting me. But his rage had blinded him. He shoved her backward, her hip slamming into the dresser with a sickening thud. A picture frame crashed to the floor, the smiling image of their wedding day splintering into shards. The sight of it, the white dress, the vows, the promise of forever, only twisted the knife deeper in his chest. To him, it all looked like a cruel joke. Emily scrambled to her feet, clutching the edge of the dresser, her voice hoarse. This isn't you. You're not this man. You're the man I fell in love with. Please, Michael, don't do this. But Michael wasn't listening. The rational doctor, the calm professional, was gone. What remained was a storm of pride and fury, a man consumed by the fear of being exposed. He advanced again, his fists trembling at his sides. Emily darted for the bedroom door, but he caught her arm, yanking her back. They struggled, crashing into the nightstand. The lamp toppled, plunging the room into shadows lit only by the faint glow from the hallway. Their breaths came ragged, tangled with sobs and curses. Let me go, she screamed, tears streaming. You ruined me, he roared back, his voice breaking into something primal. The fight stretched on, violent in its intimacy. Husband and wife locked in a desperate struggle, years of love and silence collapsing into raw violence. Emily clawed at his arms, her nails leaving streaks of red. Michael's grip tightened, his mind a blur of panic and rage, until he felt her body falter beneath his strength. In that moment, the air in the room seemed to shift. The cicadas outside still hummed. The neighborhood still slept, but inside the Lawson home the perfect life had shattered beyond repair. What had once been whispered arguments and hidden pain had boiled over into something that could never be undone. Michael stood over her, his chest heaving, his hands trembling as he realized what had just happened, or perhaps refused to realize it fully. The papers still lay scattered on the bed, silent witnesses to the secret that had sparked the fire. The night was not over. The police had yet to arrive. But in that room, beneath the weight of betrayal and broken pride, the marriage of Michael and Emily Lawson had already ended in the most brutal way imaginable. The struggle didn't last long, but to Michael it felt endless, like every second stretched into an hour. Emily's cries had softened, her hands weaker against his grip. He had her pinned near the edge of the bed, the papers still scattered around them like torn confessions. In a final desperate effort, she tried to pull away, but Michael's strength, fueled by rage and panic, was too much. When her body went limp, the silence that followed was deafening. The sound of his own breath filled the room, ragged, uneven, almost animalistic. Michael staggered back, his hands shaking, staring at them as though they no longer belonged to him. Emily lay motionless on the carpet, strands of her hair fanned across the floor, the side of her face pressed against the edge of a torn medical form. For a few seconds, denial wrapped around him. He whispered her name, half expecting her to stir, to open her eyes, and tell him this was some nightmare. "Emily, get up." His voice cracked. He dropped to his knees beside her, shaking her shoulder, but her body remained heavy, still unresponsive. That was when he noticed the faint red marks on her neck, his own fingerprints etched like evidence. His stomach churned. He scrambled to his feet, pacing in a circle, clutching his hair. He hadn't meant for it to go this far, had he? It was supposed to be an argument, a release of fury, not this. Not death. Downstairs, the house hummed with its usual silence, but outside, the night had changed. A neighbor walking their dog had heard something, thuds, a scream, the muffled chaos through the thin suburban walls. It was enough to spark suspicion, enough to trigger a call to 911. "Something's wrong at the Lawson house," the neighbor told dispatch. "I heard yelling. It sounded violent." Inside, Michael tried to compose himself. He gathered the papers, stuffing them back into the folder as though hiding them might erase what had happened. His brain spun with half-formed plans, call it an accident, stage a fall, maybe even flee. But every option unraveled under the weight of his panic. He looked at Emily again, her body pale in the dim light, and a wave of nausea hit him. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights cut through the darkness of Willow Creek Drive. The neighborhood stirred, curtains shifted, doors cracked open. Two patrol cars pulled up quietly but firmly, their headlights sweeping across the pristine lawn. The knock at the door was sharp. "Police! Open up!" Michael froze. For a heartbeat, he considered not answering, pretending he wasn't home. But the sight of those lights in the window made it clear there was no escaping this. With trembling hands, he opened the front door. An officer stood tall, flashlight in hand. "We received a disturbance call. Is everything okay in here?" Michael forced a smile that never reached his eyes. "Yes, officer, everything's fine. Just an argument. We're both fine." His voice wavered, too thin to sound convincing. The officer's gaze swept over him, lingering on the sweat on his brow, the trembling in his fingers. "Sir, we'll need to come in and check." Michael hesitated, then stepped aside. The officers moved quickly, trained eyes scanning the living room, the hallway, the stairs. When they reached the bedroom door, the silence inside spoke louder than anything. The beam of a flashlight fell across Emily's body. One officer crouched immediately, checking for a pulse. His voice was flat when he looked up. "She's gone." The words pierced Michael like a blade. He collapsed against the wall, muttering, "It was an accident. I didn't mean." The officers exchanged glances, professional but grim. The room told its own story. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, torn paper scattered like confetti of a life unraveled. The red marks on Emily's neck told the rest. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away," one officer said firmly, pulling Michael to his feet. Cold metal cuffs clicked around his wrists, the final punctuation to the night's chaos. Neighbors gathered outside, faces pale in the glow of police lights. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The Lawsons? No, it can't be. They were perfect. Cameras clicked as the first journalists arrived, tipped off by the scanner. The story was already beginning to spread. Michael was led down the steps, his head bowed, The man who once commanded respect, now a shadow of himself. Across the lawn, the flashing lights reflected in the eyes of his stunned neighbors. A woman clutched her robe tighter, whispering they were the couple everyone admired. Back inside, detectives began photographing the scene, bagging evidence. The folder of medical records lay half-hidden beneath the bed, a silent witness to the secret that had ignited the violence. The papers told a story Emily never wanted exposed, and Michael never wanted discovered. But now it was out, and it would consume not just their marriage, but the community that had placed them on a pedestal. A perfect couple undone in a single night, their home forever marked as a crime scene. The clock read 2:14 a.m. when the coroner arrived to remove Emily's body. The cicadas still hummed outside, indifferent as if nothing had changed. But for everyone on Willow Creek Drive, nothing would ever be the same again. The Lawson house transformed overnight from a symbol of success to a crime scene under floodlights. Yellow tapes stretched across the driveway. Reporters pressed at the edges of the cul-de-sac, and uniformed officers moved in and out of the front door like shadows. What had once been the polished home of a respected doctor was now stripped bare, every drawer, every surface, every detail under scrutiny. Detective Carla Hughes, a seasoned investigator with the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, stepped through the entryway just after dawn. She'd worked homicides for over 15 years, and the scene already told her more than Michael Lawson ever could. Domestic disturbance. Signs of struggle. No forced entry. One spouse dead. 90% of the time, the other spouse was responsible. Still, procedure demanded patience. Evidence would tell the story, and Hughes trusted the details more than she trusted words. In the bedroom, technicians dusted for prints and photographed every angle. The bedspread was wrinkled, papers strewn across the floor like confetti after a storm. A shattered picture frame bled shards of glass near the dresser. On the carpet, faint but visible, was the outline of Emily Lawson's body, removed hours earlier by the coroner. Cause of death. Hughes asked. Preliminary signs of strangulation. The medical examiner's assistant replied. Red marks on the neck consistent with manual pressure. Defensive wounds on her forearms. She fought back. Hughes nodded grimly. She crouched near the torn papers, picking one up with gloved hands. A medical record. She skimmed the first lines. Patient name, date of birth, gender marker, male. Her brow furrowed. It wasn't the kind of document you expected in a marital fight, but it explained the chaos in the room, the fury in the handwriting on the pages that had been ripped. This was the trigger, she murmured. Downstairs, Michael Lawson sat in handcuffs at the kitchen table, guarded by 2 officers. His once pristine shirt was rumpled, streaked with sweat and faint traces of blood. His eyes were hollow, his face pale. He muttered to himself, fragments of sentences no one could piece together. Detective Hughes entered, her voice calm but firm. Dr. Lawson, I need to hear your version of what happened. Michael lifted his head slowly. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said, his voice hoarse. We argued. She lied to me. 10 years she lied. I snapped. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Hughes pressed. His eyes darted to the floor. Didn't mean to kill her. It was as close to a confession as she needed, but Hughes kept her expression steady. She knew the DA would want more than words. They'd want evidence that stood in court. And there was plenty. Forensic techs swabbed Michael's hands, finding faint traces of skin under his fingernails, consistent with Emily's desperate attempt to fight him off. The bruising on her neck matched the size and shape of his hands. Neighbors came forward, reporting screams and loud crashes around 1:30 a.m., followed by eerie silence. One neighbor, an insomniac, had called 911 after hearing Emily shout, "You're hurting me," before everything went quiet. But the most damning evidence was Michael's own pride. He couldn't stop talking about his reputation, his career, how it would all be ruined if the truth came out. Detectives listened carefully as he spiraled in custody, his words betraying the motive behind his rage. He wasn't just a man who lost control. He was a man who feared humiliation more than he valued the life of his wife. By the end of the week, the pieces of the puzzle were clear. The medical examiner confirmed cause of death: asphyxiation due to strangulation. Time of death: approximately 1:45 a.m. Toxicology found nothing unusual in Emily's system. There is no sign of intruders, no forced locks, no footprints except those of Michael and Emily. The folder of medical records became the centerpiece of the case. Detectives pieced together Emily's history, her transition years before meeting Michael, her deliberate choice to keep it private. Friends of Emily who were interviewed described her as kind, secretive, sometimes fearful of rejection. One recalled her saying, "Michael loves me, but if he ever knew everything, I don't think he could handle it." She had been right. The DA's office filed charges for second-degree murder, citing passion and rage as the catalyst, but arguing the violence was intentional and sustained. Prosecutors knew the defense would cling to the word shock, that they'd paint Michael as a man blindsided by a devastating revelation. But the bruises on Emily's arms, the shredded papers, the 911 call, and Michael's own words painted a different picture. Detective Hughes stood before the press on the courthouse steps, her voice steady as cameras flashed. This case is about more than secrets. It's about choice. Emily Lawson deserved the choice to live, no matter her past. That choice was taken from her. The community reeled. Neighbors who had once admired the Lawsons now gathered in hushed groups, struggling to reconcile the perfect couple with the horror in their midst. Some spoke with sympathy for Michael, others with fury. The media latched onto the story, branding it with a headline that spread across Texas and beyond: "The Gynecologist's Deadly Discovery." For Hughes, the evidence told the only story that mattered. A woman was dead, a husband had killed her, and the secret at the center of their marriage could not excuse the violence that ended it. By the time the case was handed over for trial, the folder of medical records, the coroner's report, the photographs of Emily's bruises, and the 911 audio had become an iron wall of proof. Whatever narrative Michael's defense tried to spin, the facts would speak louder. And those facts were damning. The courthouse in Dallas was packed the morning the trial of Dr. Michael Lawson began. Reporters swarmed the steps, their cameras pointed toward the glass doors, shouting questions that went unanswered. Spectators lined up as if waiting for a show, whispering about the doctor who had everything and the wife whose past was about to be dissected in front of strangers. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. The name of the case, State of Texas versus Michael Lawson, was already infamous, splashed across tabloids and true crime programs as the Gynecologist's Deadly Discovery. Michael entered in a gray suit, his wrists free for the first time since his arrest, but still weighed down by shackles of shame. He looked thinner, his hair less groomed than the man who once commanded exam rooms and dinner parties. His eyes flicked to the jury box, then quickly down to the table where his defense attorney, Samuel Breyer, waited. Across the aisle sat ADA Carla Nguyen, calm and focused, her files neatly stacked. She had built her career on prosecuting violent crimes, and this case wasn't just another murder. It was a chance to put a spotlight on how secrecy, pride, and prejudice could culminate in tragedy. When the jury was sworn in, Judge Leonard Harlow addressed the court, his voice echoing against the paneled walls. "You will hear disturbing evidence in this case, but your duty is to weigh the facts, not the speculation. Let the law guide you." Nguyen rose for her opening statement, her tone deliberate. "The evidence will show that Michael Lawson killed his wife, Emily Lawson, not in a moment of unavoidable accident, but in sustained violence. He strangled her with his own hands. He tried to cover up the truth, and he admitted as much when detectives questioned him. This case is not about secrets or personal histories. It is about choice. Emily Lawson deserved the choice to live, and Michael Lawson took that away." Breyer followed with a different framing. His voice was softer, almost paternal, as he turned toward the jury. "Michael Lawson is a respected physician, a man who gave his life to helping women. One night, he was confronted with a shocking revelation, something hidden from him for 10 years of marriage. He snapped. Was it right? No. But was it murder? Or was it a crime of passion, a man overwhelmed by betrayal and deception? We ask you to see the humanity in his mistake. The trial moved swiftly, but each piece of evidence cut deeper. Neighbors testified about the screams they heard, one replaying the frantic 911 call that captured Emily's last desperate words. "You're hurting me." The medical examiner displayed photographs of the bruises around her neck, explaining how the pressure required to end her life lasted several minutes. Too long to call an accident. And then came the folder. The medical records Emily had hidden, now sealed in evidence bags, became the most controversial element of the trial. Prosecutors introduced them carefully, knowing the defense would use them to sway the jury's sympathy toward Michael. The courtroom went silent as the words were read aloud. Sex, male. Surgical history, gender transition procedures. Gasps rippled through the gallery, reporters' pens scratching furiously. Gwen was quick to steady the narrative. Members of the jury, Emily Lawson's past does not excuse her death. She had the right to privacy, the right to live her truth. What matters here is that Michael Lawson discovered these documents, confronted her, and within the hour she was dead. Secrets don't strangle people. Hands do. The defense leaned into the revelation. Breyer argued that Michael had been psychologically ambushed, that any reasonable man blindsided with such a truth might lose control. He wasn't thinking. He was panicking. He is guilty of being human, not of murder. But under cross-examination, Michael's own words undermined him. Detectives recounted his statements the night of the crime. "She lied to me. 10 years she lied. My career is ruined." His focus on reputation, not grief, told the jury everything they needed to know. The prosecution's closing was sharp, every word deliberate. This is not a case about gender. This is not a case about medicine. This is a case about control, about pride, and about the rage of a man who valued his image more than his wife's life. Emily Lawson loved her husband. She begged for forgiveness. Instead, she was silenced forever. If we excuse this, we excuse violence itself. When the jury filed out to deliberate, the courtroom exhaled. Hours ticked by, reporters filing updates, the crowd buzzing with speculation. Would they see him as a murderer or as a man caught in passion storm? By late evening, the jury returned. Everyone rose as the foreperson stood, verdict in hand. Michael's face was pale, his lips pressed tight. On the charge of murder in the second degree, the foreperson read, "We find the defendant guilty." The words landed heavy, final. Emily's friends in the gallery clutched one another, tears streaking down their cheeks. Michael's shoulders sagged, his lawyer whispering in his ear, but the weight of the word hung in the air like a sentence all its own. Judge Harlow's gavel struck. "Dr. Lawson, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Reporters rushed outside, broadcasting the verdict across the country. Some framed it as justice for Emily, others as a cautionary tale of secrecy and betrayal. Hashtags lit up social media. Hashtag justice for Emily. Hashtag deadly discovery, igniting debates about gender identity, marriage, and violence. Inside the courtroom, as Michael was led away in cuffs, Detective Hughes watched silently. She had seen countless verdicts, but this one left her with a lingering ache. Because no matter the sentence, no matter the headlines, one truth remained: a woman who wanted nothing more than to be loved as she had paid the ultimate price. And the perfect couple on Willow Creek Drive was now a ghost story whispered by neighbors whenever the porch lights came on and the night felt too quiet. The trial was over, but the story refused to die. In the weeks that followed, the Lawson house sat silent behind yellowing grass and a mailbox stuffed with unread letters. Neighbors passed it with lowered eyes, whispering about how quickly a dream life had turned to ruin. Some spoke of Michael as a monster, others as a man pushed past his breaking point. But everyone agreed on one thing. The perfect couple on Willow Creek Drive had become a cautionary tale no one would forget. Emily's funeral was held quietly, far from the media glare. A small group of friends gathered in a modest chapel, their voices breaking as they sang hymns. Photographs of Emily, smiling at picnics, holding sparklers on the 4th of July, lined the pews. For many, it was the first time they saw her as more than just Michael's elegant wife. In those pictures, she wasn't a secret or a headline. She was simply Emily, a woman who wanted to be loved. Outside the chapel, reporters lingered anyway, hungry for sound bites. The story had gone national, picked apart on talk shows, podcasts, and opinion columns. Some framed Emily as a victim twice over. First of a society that forced her to hide, and then of a husband who chose rage over compassion. Others focused on Michael, debating whether his actions were born of shock, betrayal, or deep prejudice. On social media, the debate raged under hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #DeadlyDiscovery. One side demanded accountability and compassion for trans lives, posting candle emojis and memorial graphics. The other side twisted the case into something uglier, using it to stoke fear and division. For weeks, Emily's name trended, her life reduced to a symbol in battles far bigger than she ever wanted. At the hospital where Michael once worked, his name was scrubbed from the brass plaque of physicians on staff. Patients who had trusted him spoke of their disbelief, of how he once seemed calm, reassuring, incapable of violence. Colleagues shook their heads, trying to reconcile the respected gynecologist with the man in handcuffs. One nurse put it plainly, he cared so much about reputation, but now his name will only ever mean one thing: murderer. Detective Carla Hughes carried the case with her long after the verdict. She often replayed Emily's last word from the 911 call. "You're hurting me," a plea that still haunted her. For Hughes, it wasn't just another file closed. It was a reminder of how fragile love could be when pride and fear took control. She kept a copy of the trial's closing arguments in her desk drawer, the line she never wanted to forget: "Secrets don't strangle people. Hands do." Meanwhile, Michael began his life behind bars. Stripped of his title and privilege, he was just another inmate, his reputation meaningless in a place where no one cared who he had been. In the quiet of his cell, he replayed the night over and over. The moment his hands closed around Emily's throat, the way her eyes had looked, pleading, betrayed, terrified. But instead of remorse, what often surfaced was bitterness. He still muttered about betrayal, about how she had ruined him. Even in prison, his pride clung tighter than regret. The larger community wrestled with lessons they weren't sure how to name. Churches held vigils in Emily's honor, their steps lit with candles, voices rising in prayer for a woman who had hidden too long in fear. Advocacy groups seized on her story, arguing that secrecy was born of stigma, and that tragedies like hers were the cost of a society still unwilling to accept people for who they are. And yet, for all the speeches, the think pieces, and the hashtags, the heart of the story remained devastatingly simple. A woman who loved her husband was gone, and a man who could have chosen love instead chose violence. On Willow Creek Drive, the seasons changed. Kids rode bikes past the Lawson house, their parents telling them not to stare. New families avoided the cul-de-sac altogether, afraid of what it had come to represent. The house, once admired for its symmetry and beauty, became a ghost, its windows blank eyes watching over the street. Years from now, people will still tell the story of Dr. Michael and Emily Lawson. They'll remember the perfect couple, the hidden secret, the night everything unraveled. They'll argue about what should have been done differently, about truth and trust, about pride and shame. But in the end, the lesson will remain chillingly clear. Behind even the most flawless facade, a storm can be waiting. And when pride meets secrecy, love alone may not be enough to keep the darkness at bay. Emily's name lingers, etched in memory not only as a victim, but as a reminder of how costly silence can be and how deadly it is when compassion gives way to rage.